Two things: what's happening to the families that have already been brought to Australia, and secondly, what's going to happen to all the other people who are still on Manus and Nauru. So those two questions. The first one, what's happening to those who have come? Well, we're not covering ourselves in glory, I don't think, with how we're treating the people that we're bringing down here. Many have been put, at least temporarily, into detention down here, and that, of course, you know, revives all the fears of detention centres, because again, there's uncertainty in their minds about what happens next. The next stage for them is going out into community detention, and most of them are actually only being kept in detention for 3, 4, 5 weeks, but one lot was certainly there for 6 weeks. And there are still some in detention here who need to go out into what we call community detention. And community detention is simply a house in the suburbs, but technically they're still in detention. So all of those people who are being brought down from Nauru, the children and their families, are still technically in detention, whether it's closed detention in places like Broadmeadows here or Villawood or Queensland, whatever, they are still, or whether they're out in the community, they're still in detention, technically. One family that we visited is out in Hallam. That's a father with 4 sons, and you know Hallam, probably. And they're 45 minutes from the public, not from public transport, but from the shops and the railway station and so on. We have since found that there's a bus that goes not too far from where they are, but when they first landed there, they did seem to be in a wilderness. Now, these are people who've never set foot in Australia before, let alone Melbourne, let alone onto public transport here. So for a couple of days, and the first night that they were there, they were given some rice and a bottle of milk. That's presumably the caseworker. I don't think she was probably trying to be cruel, but she had no access to other money or whatever. And until they get a bank account, which is technically what the caseworkers from either Life Without Barriers or AIMS, whichever one they're assigned to, the caseworkers are supposed to help them set up bank accounts and so on, because until they get a bank account, they can't get any money through from Centrelink, and they should be getting some small payment from Centrelink to help them survive. So without some friendly people around, they would have been in a pretty bad way, because that particular family, as I understand it, still hadn't, well, certainly 2 days ago, hadn't had a bank account set up, so therefore no money. They're in, you know, the department puts people into whatever housing is there. It's not, you know, what's suitable, what's good, but just what's there. So that's the families who are coming down. The other thing that we've got to make certain for them is that they get legal representation, so that the lawyers enact what we've called the 72-hour clause, which means that they join the group of people where there's an agreement that if they were to be taken back to Nauru, they would be given 72 hours notice. And then, you know, the lawyers would swing into action and try and get a ruling saying they couldn't be taken back. Because technically they still are being told that they're only here to get medical help and they have to return to Nauru. That's what technically they're being told. I can't imagine that the government, even if they wanted to, could round up between 400 and 500 people, close to 500 now, and actually get them somehow onto a plane and get them back to Nauru. I think that'd be a revolution in Australia. I like to think that at any rate. But technically that's what they're being told. And that is, again, technically what could happen. So the lawyers want to lodge them as part of this other cohort, which came down earlier, and say they can't be taken back without this notice. So that's the families so far. There's a lot, though. The men on Manus are probably in the worst situation. I know 2 or 3 people in Manus and talk to them fairly regularly, and they say, they're not asylum seekers, they're ordinary people in the community. They say that there are threatened suicides and attempted suicides every single day, sometimes 2 or 3 a day, and that there's simply not the facilities, there's certainly not the psychological, help to in any way help the men through that and through the trauma, but there's not the medical help, even the sheer help for their physical conditions on Manus. Some of them are taken across to PNG, but then some of them were taken back before they had the treatment. Things are really bad for those men, and they have virtually given up hope now. I think until about 3 or 4 months ago, the leadership in that group, among the detainees themselves, was strong enough to actually, keep at least a modicum of hope going. But that seems now to have nearly gone. Some of the men on Manus are asking to go across to Nauru. It's pretty bad when you ask to go from Manus to Nauru, but my understanding of that is that they think that they might be included in the US deal if they go across there. They're eligible. A lot of people are not eligible for the US deal. They're being screened out because they come from countries where the US have said they won't take them. So Iran, Somalia, several countries they've said they won't take people from. So, there's a limited number of people who can satisfy that US deal, and it is continuing, but at a glacial rate, extraordinarily slow. There's still only, I think, about 400 out of the 1,200 that they promised to take. Whether they'll ever take all of those, who knows?